story time. I'm trying to get through this without crying, so we're hoping the Squishmallow is going to help. How many of you have a favorite teacher? How many of you have a least favorite teacher? Don't say names. Do you think we have favorites? Do you think we have least favorites? This story is about Mrs. Thompson. She was a 5th grade teacher, and on the very first day of school, she stood at the front of her room and she told her class a lie, because she told them that she was going to love them all the same and treat them all the same, and they were going to have a great 5th grade year. But Mrs. Thompson knew that this was a lie, because in the back corner, there was a kid named Teddy. And Mrs. Thompson knew Teddy from the 4th grade. And Teddy was a stinky kid who hated school, and really, people kind of hated him. And Mrs. Thompson was like, ugh, why did they put Teddy in her class? But she said they were going to have a great year, and she meant it. But as the year progressed, Teddy was just a hard kid. He had no friends, and he acted like he didn't want friends. He didn't do his work. He didn't participate. He did smell bad. And he just really wasn't a pleasant kid to be around. And honestly, Mrs. Thompson knew that Teddy was going to be in 5th grade again next year. She just hoped that she did not have him. And she actually kind of started just enjoying putting big red X's on his paper. If Teddy didn't care about school, why did Mrs. Thompson have to care about him? She couldn't do enough caring for both of them. She had enough kids, right, to take care of. And he didn't care. Well, Christmas time comes around. And you know, in 5th grade, a lot of times kids still bring presents to their teachers. Hey, middle school teachers love presents too. I mean, I'm just saying. Anyway, but they were having their Christmas party, and all the 5th graders had brought presents for Mrs. Thompson. And they were all wrapped in the most beautiful paper, all stacked up on the table over there. All of them except one. And it had been wrapped in a brown paper sack. And someone had drawn a snowman and drawn a Christmas tree. It was pretty ghetto. And of course, everybody laughed because they knew that that gift was from Teddy. Even Mrs. Thompson was kind of like, what did the stinky kid bring me for Christmas? And she didn't want to open it, of course, first. And she didn't want to save it for the last. So she just kind of tried to sneak it in the middle. This is the part. I don't know why. This is so sad to me. Well, yeah, I do. Because she opens it up. And out falls half a bottle of perfume and a bracelet with some of the stones missing. Well, of course, all the kids start laughing and teasing Teddy because he brought Mrs. Thompson a used Christmas gift. But Mrs. Thompson just puts the bracelet on and sprays the perfume and tells Teddy how much she loves it and goes on about her business, opening up presents. And it's at the end of the day, and they're exhausted, and everybody's ready to go home for Christmas, and Teddy I'm just going to have to say, she notices Teddy is just kind of sticking behind after everybody else has left. And he comes up to her, and she says, Teddy, I hope you have a Merry Christmas. And he said, I'm glad you like your presents. You smell just like my mama used to. And he leaves. So Mrs. Thompson decides that she needs to go and pull Teddy's cumulative folder. Y'all know we have folders on kids from kindergarten, first, second, your whole life, right? So she goes and she pulls Teddy's kindergarten folder, and it says, Teddy is a great kid, a bright student. He works hard, just a joy to have in class. His 1st grade teacher wrote, Teddy's a great kid, makes friends, gets along with others, works hard, gonna be a huge success. His 2nd grade teacher writes something similar, but makes a note that his mom has been diagnosed with cancer. And then in 3rd grade, it was rough. Said Teddy missed a lot of school. His mom was sick. And at the end of the 3rd grade, Teddy's mom died. And then Mrs. Thompson knew for Teddy from 4th grade, where he was the stinky, mean kid who no one liked and didn't want to be there. And now here he sits in her class. Y'all, she felt like the worst teacher in the world. Here she was, hating on this little kid whose mom had died of cancer. And she didn't even know. But she made a decision over Christmas vacation that when they got back in the new year, she was going to get to know Teddy and work with Teddy. And that's what she did. They started having lunch together. He started staying in from recess. He started going to tutorials. And by the end of the 5th grade, not only was Teddy caught up, he had one of the highest grades in her class. And Mrs. Thompson felt confident sending Teddy to middle school. And he told her, at the end of the year, Miss Thompson, you're the best teacher I've ever had. Well, a few years later, she gets an invitation in the mail. And it says, Dear Mrs. Thompson, you're still the best teacher I've ever had. I'm graduating from high school, valedictorian. That means number 1 with the highest grade of any kid. And I would love for you to be there. Well, of course she goes. And a few years later, she gets another invitation. Dear Mrs. Thompson, you're still the best teacher I've ever had. I'm graduating from college magna cum laude with honors. And I would love for you to be there. So, of course, Mrs. Thompson goes. A few years later, she gets another invitation. Dear Mrs. Thompson, you're still the best teacher I've ever had. I'm graduating from medical school, and I would love for you to be there. Sincerely, Dr. Theodore M. Stoddard. And then a few years later, she gets one more invitation in the mail. It's his wedding invitation. And he says, my mom passed away, and I would love for you to come to my wedding and sit where my mother would sit. You're still the best teacher I've ever had. So she puts on his mama's bracelet, and she sprays his mama's perfume. And she goes and she watches her little Teddy marry the love of his life. And at the reception, he comes up and he introduces Mrs. Thompson to his wife. And he says, hey, this is Mrs. Thompson, the best teacher I've ever had. She changed my life. And Mrs. Thompson said, Teddy, you got it all wrong. You changed my life. Because that day, Mrs. Thompson quit just teaching reading and writing and arithmetic, and she started teaching kids. And she started getting to know kids and started to make more of a difference and impact on her students' lives. The reason this story is so important to me is because Teddy could be sitting next to you in class. And middle school kids are mean. Y'all are making fun of his shoes or his dirty clothes or that he didn't take a shower, not knowing that his mom died of cancer and his dad's too busy to help take care of the little kid. But yeah, you're going to be mean and make fun of him. Not just you, teachers, students, adults, y'all, compassion. We need compassion. You don't know what the person sitting next to you is going through. Do they get to go home to milk and cookies after school? Or do they go home to their stepdad's fist? The world has enough mean. There is death and divorce and drug addiction and car wrecks and hurricanes and natural disasters. The world is tough enough. It's our job to be nice and kind. It is our job to bring the light and the love. We can't control when Teddies lose their mom to cancer. But we can control how we treat the Teddies. You can control how you treat the people around you. Are you working to make the world easier, better, lovelier?